gentlemen, and welcome to Seekers of the Supernatural. My name is Tony Espera. I'll be your moderator tonight, along with Ed and Lorraine Warren. Last show we spoke of the Amityville Horror in our Part 1 series. We delved more or less, Ed, into the history of Amityville, to the background of the house. But tonight I think what we'd like to do is speak more of the phenomena that actually occurred in the home. So can we begin, Ed, with some of the phenomena that did actually occur at 112 Ocean Avenue?
Okay, in the beginning, George and Kathy would feel the psychic cold throughout all the rooms. No matter how many logs they'd throw on a fire, it was icy cold. That's because it's a psychic cold, and the cold is being drawn. The heat from the bodies of the people in that house is being drawn, and that heat is going to be used as an energy fuel source for the spirits in that house. So they'd feel the psychic cold. They'd hear magic whispering, voices throughout the hallways. At night, they would see ghost lights over their beds in the rooms. There was a time when George and Kathy found themselves about 2 foot from the ceiling. George looked over at Kathy and said, "Do you believe this? Do you believe it?" And of course, then they went lower themselves down into the bed again. But there would be the footsteps. There would be the slime that they would find on the staircase. Now, these are called apports. These materialize or dematerialize in such haunted houses. For instance, in many homes that we go into, we will find that you might see blood, as they did, coming down the wall. But if you went over there and touched that wall, there'd be no blood. This is a telepathic projection to the viewer, and it bypasses the physical eye, goes into the mind's eye, and they see it as a medium would see it. There was the marching band, as they described it, around 3:15 in the morning when the murders had taken place. A lot of things would happen at around 3 o'clock. We call this the devil's hour because it's an insult to the Trinity, anything that comes in threes. They would hear this marching band. George would jump out of bed. He'd go running down the stairs. As soon as he'd get down to the foyer, the music would stop. But he'd look into the living room, that huge living room, which you'll see a picture of, and the rugs were actually rolled up and the furniture was pushed over to the sides of the walls as though somebody were actually marching there. There were so much different types of phenomena that occurred to us and the people that went in there. It was incredible. I told you about the experience last week of where I felt as I was being smothered. Going into that home again, Lorraine felt many things. She, as a clairvoyant, would be more sensitive. Mary Pasquarella, who was the director of the Psychic Research Institute in Hamden, Connecticut, never went into a haunted house after that. She gave up the work because she was so badly affected by it. The cameraman that went in there with Channel 5 news team had heart palpitations. These guys, they were in battles in World War II. Of course, it bothered them, but never as much as going into that house there.
Well, it was the physical effects on their body, Tony, that was bothering them. And then one of the scientists that had come up from Duke University, he became so terrified in this home, and the chair that he was sitting on actually went right backwards with him in it. They had a real hard time just stabilizing him emotionally in that home. But it seemed like, and it's true to the fact that people are affected on their weakest, most vulnerable levels. And I think many times people of science go into a home like this not really expecting to be affected personally, just to be there and be witness to it. But they have nothing to fall back on. They have no faith, Tony. They can't call on any inner strength other than their own personal knowledge. And in a way that, as far as I'm concerned, they can't possibly be too objective that way.
You know, Father Pecoraro told me about an experience he had when he left the house. He went back to his rectory. He was up in his room. Suddenly the room became icy cold. Ghost lights were shooting all over the place, and a deep, harsh, growling voice occurred in that room. He seen what he described as a lizard-like creature. Now, as a demonologist, I have seen diabolical, In fact, at one time, I had seen 43 of them. I knew exactly what he was talking about. It's something that you can't describe to anybody. It's something that's from another world.
Mm-hmm.
And as he described that, you could see the terror in this man's face. He wasn't used to these types of things. And the same thing happened to him again in a hotel room in Florida with a rabbi.
Mm-hmm.
The both of them experienced this. And when this lizard-like creature appeared in that room to these two men, and it finally faded, the glass in the windows turned red.
Now, speaking of the clergy, Lorraine, you had mentioned before, and I think we're going to see a slide of him, you have mentioned Padre Pio from Italy, who I believe was a Franciscan
Yes,
monk.
he was. He was a Franciscan
I
monk.
think we're going to have a shot of him coming up. Now, if we could get that slide.
Stigmata.
I guess here it is right
Yes.
here. Can you explain, Ed, what we're looking at here? And Lorraine,
Yes.
either one of you.
He suffered the wounds of Christ, Tony, for 50 years of his life, which meant that he bled just as Christ bled on the cross.
So did he bleed from his feet also? Or
Yes,
just-
he did. Yes.
Now, the incredible thing was that 10 minutes after this man died, 10
Yeah.
minutes, all of these wounds disappeared.
They all were healed,
Really?
Tony. Yes.
There were the critics who would say, well, the man did this to himself. After he was dead, he couldn't do anything to himself. And these wounds simply disappeared.
Okay, here's a close-up.
Okay, now,
Here's a close-up of Padre Pio.
look at this close-up. Look at this profile.
If we could go back a little further and see the hood.
If we could pull back just a little
Yeah.
bit on
Just
that.
a
and see
little
the
bit,
whole-
and so you can see the hood and the profile of the
That's
man's face. Now, Padre Pio was a very holy and pious priest. And the reason I have so much devotion to him, Tony, is not only because of what happened to me in Amityville, but when I went in there, I really didn't know why I felt as uneasy as I felt. And this man had the gift of discernment, plus he physically fought devils in his life. He played such an important role of our investigation.
And I think the next slide is going to show,
Yes.
quite dramatically, in fact, a picture taken in the Amityville home. Lorraine, can you explain this picture?
Okay, this is the wet bar room. This is the room in the front of the house, Tony, that you see where that's all the windows. Now, I stood here, and you can see two of the researchers are with me. I have his relic cupped tight in my hand, and I'm asking for his help. And also,
Padre Pio.
oh yes, I'm
Okay.
asking for his help and his protection.
Now, what's that up in the antlers there?
Now, photographs are being taken, and look at that photograph, Tony, and you see the outline of the very man that you just looked at the portrait of before, the photograph
The
of.
hood,
That's
the beard,
astonishing.
the nose.
Isn't it? Now, the photographs that you looked at were given to us by a priest who had served with Padre Pio in life and who really helped us in documenting that particular
I
psychic
think we have
photo.
a cropped picture again. I believe we have a cropped picture again. If we could get the next slide up to see, there it is. That looks.
There was
a close
also a
shot.
head on the antlers.
What is
Yes.
that? What is that head on? It looks like a
Everybody
person's
said it
head.
looked like Ronald DeFeo. To this day, we don't know what
We
it
don't
is.
know what that is. We really do not know what that is, Tony.
It's
We have
apparently
no
the head-
idea.
Does that look
face.
like Ronald DeFeo?
Yes, it does.
Yes.
It looks very much like Ronald DeFeo.
Yes,
Now,
but
has anybody looked at these pictures and verified that they're
Yes.
not fakes?
Father Negre looked at this photograph. He was a very close associate of Padre Pio's, and when he looked at it, he knelt down and he blessed himself, and he said,
says
Padre Pio.
And he's
Wow.
the man who went back to his cell there at the monastery where we met with him in California, Tony. Now, you know, we were getting a lot of flack when we publicly showed that photograph. It was during a period of time back in the late 70s that there was really a lot of dissension regarding religious areas and when you're showing religious proof. So I prayed to him and I said to him that if that really was him, that I wanted to be guided and directed in areas that could help me to better understand and prove out that photograph. Otherwise, we would never, ever use it. And Tony, that is why, after that, that we met Father Negre. And I'll never forget the day I had gone to Mass that particular day with a man who was in charge of ABC television in California. We're walking out. Nothing was mentioned about Padre Pio when all of a sudden this man said to me, "Lorraine, did you know Padre Pio?" And I said, "Yes." And I says, "Although I never met him." And he said, "Well, there's a priest right near here who served with him while he was still alive." Wow. Padre Pio died in '68, Tony.
And this picture was taken in '76?
Yes.
Now keep in mind
yes.
that nobody knows that Lorraine has asked for his intervention.
Oh, no.
She has a relic in her hands, and this picture with infrared film is taken, and there is the face of Padre Pio above her. But this next picture that we're going to see
I think
was
this is
taken
this is an astonishing picture, in fact.
Yes, with infrared film.
Oh, yes.
And it's in the upstairs bedrooms. Just to the left there, you see what looks like a small boy's face looking out with bioluminescent eyes. This was the room of one of the young boys who was murdered there.
Isn't that
Now,
eerie?
a lot of people would say, well, is that the spirit of the young boy? No, it is not the spirit of the young boy, but it is a diabolical spirit with luminescent eyes that appears in that home to confuse the investigators.
But you think that is an evil spirit, Ed?
Positively. Everything about this house was evil. You know, a lot of people say, well, you know, I was in that house one time and nothing ever happened to me. It's not that a house is haunted 24 hours a day. You don't walk into a haunted house and see ghosts flitting all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
After 9 o'clock, the psychic hours start, 9 to 6 in the morning. Mm-hmm. 9 o'clock, the energy starts to build up because of the darkness. Mm-hmm. Then you start to get what we call the infestation in a house like Amityville. First you hear the little knockings, the rappings. Then you might hear pounding sounds. Then you might hear crying or sobbing, hysterical laughter. These are the types of things that actually happen in these homes. Mm-hmm. But pictures like this, taken with infrared film, the camera is neither for nor against the supernatural or preternatural world.
Right.
It only takes what it sees. Mm-hmm. And what it sees here is a spirit of a diabolical nature in that room.
You know what was amazing, Tony? When we met with Father Pecoraro, he invited us to get together with the family and himself so he could share with us his experiences. Now, he was kind of a no-nonsense guy, too. You know, he was a judge of the Catholic Church and rather stern kind of a man. Mm-hmm. And he met with us on St. Joseph's Day, and he personally baked St. Joseph's bread for us.
But I think the experiences we had going to our home that night were terrible.
What is this shot of?
That's Mary.
Pastorella, who was, again, the director of the Psychic Research Institute in Hamden. Mm-hmm. After she left this home, she was so badly affected that she just quit the work completely. Mm-hmm. And, in fact, moved out of the state and across the country.
Wow.
Yes, she did.
So there was other psychics. There was another psychic besides yourself in there, Lorraine?
Oh, yes, and also Dr. Brian Riley's.
People?
Yes.
Okay, like,
was,
who are these people here?
Now, that's the camera crew that was so badly affected, and yet both of these men had filmed with combat assignments, had been on combat assignments. Marvin Scott himself claimed that he couldn't believe how badly these people were affected in the house.
And this next picture that we're going to see, who are these
Okay,
people?
we're looking at Dr. Alex Tanis, a very famous psychic who could actually project himself in any place in the world. And the man on the right was Dr. Carlos Osis, who was president of the American Society for Psychic Research.
So very notable people entered that home with us, Tony.
When I talked with Dr. Tanis, he said to me, Ed, I came